I'm Dean, I'm the dad.
I'm Laura, I'm the mom.
And I'm Krysta, and I'm the daughter.
And together we are Family Plot. Before we get into our, housekeeping stuff, another apology needs to go out. I am much better than I was last week. Laura's voice has taken a turn for the worse since last week.
Has it? I thought I was sounding better. I guess I was wrong.
Oh, overall, yes, but starting off, not good.
Oh, okay. How are you feeling? You were pretty rough this morning, right?
Yeah, my coughing, everything is just
So we're still a little under the weather. We are working our way back to our normal, but
yes. So
any coughs, sneezes,
anything I can't edit out, I apologize for. That being said, let's get on with the housekeeping. First and foremost, if you'd like to help us out, you can do that through Patreon. There's 2 levels. There's $1 and $3, and you get cool stuff for doing it. It's a monthly thing. You can pause it if you need to. It's all sorts of good stuff.
and boy, we always could use not even the money as much as just knowing that there are people out there who do listen to us and who are enjoying the content that we do put out.
Weirdly, we're getting a lot of feedback from people. So that's good.
Though.
That's good.
Absolutely great.
Yeah. And then there's Buy Me a Coffee, which is just any whole dollar amount. It's a one-time thing. You can help with that. If you can't do that, which we hold, not having money against no one. We've never had much ourselves.
Exactly.
If you enjoy the show, please share it on social media.
Share it with family.
Let's share it with friends.
With everyone. And if you don't enjoy the show, please keep it to yourself. Oh, that's awesome.
Because if you can't say something nice,
then don't say it at all.
I love it.
So, wait, that means we can't talk about Demix?
No, you're not gonna pick on Demix, who's not here recording with us to stand up for himself. No.
That's probably fair.
And his voice, he does not want to put his voice on the podcast.
That's also probably
Dang.
What are we talking about tonight? Well, on May 4th, may the 4th be with you. Well, on May 4th, 1970, several students gathered together on the campus of Kent State University in Ohio to protest the American conflict in Vietnam. Specifically, the fact that it had just been announced that troops would be moving into Cambodia as well. They also protested the fact that several units of National Guardsmen were stationed on the campus. This was a rough time in American history and a generational clash between those who supported the war effort and Richard Nixon and those who questioned where America was heading would lead to conflict and death in this American History Can Be Rough episode of the Family Plot podcast. But first, Krysta has a corner.
It's not just any corner, it's Krysta's corner.
And then there were claps.
Hi.
Hi, Krysta.
How's it going? Just barely.
Hey, Krysta, there's a dog on your shirt.
It's a wolf. It's a canine if you want to be less specific, but it's a wolf.
Okay.
And it's a gray wolf.
Well, yeah,
Beautiful.
it's a gray wolf with yellow eyes. I don't know why the color enters into it. Okay.
Beautiful.
So what are you talking to us about today, Krysta? What are you talking to us about? People already know what we're talking about on the podcast.
So you were watching some more Supernatural this last weekend, I know.
There was this one episode that I found
Okay.
where Sam and Dean get transferred to their actor world.
Huh.
So, like, to real life, back to their universe. So they were seen as Jared, and they were seen as...
The actor's name.
Yeah, like, the actors. And I'm just like, that's trippy. That's trippy.
That would be a little strange, yeah.
An episode was written like that for the original Star Trek. It never got produced, but it did turn up in a novelization, one of the earlier novelizations based on Star Trek. Yeah. It was DeForest Kelley, William Shatner, and James Doohan. And DeForest Kelley was able to fake everything by going, I'm a doctor, not a whatever.
Right. Yep. He was really well known for that.
So,
Probably no idea what we're
probably not. I'm sorry. You don't know what Star Trek is?
No.
No.
Oh, you
I
poor
don't
child.
think she's seen of all, and probably none of the newer ones.
Oh, you poor child.
Well, you have to keep in mind, hun, that from the time she was 3.5-ish, until just a little bit before, until you came and we moved together as a family, she didn't have any TV.
Oh, yeah.
All she had was YouTube videos and things like that. She didn't have
I
any
grew
TV.
up on Cookie Swirl C,
Yeah.
Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, all of that. That's what I grew
Yeah,
up
we
on.
didn't have any cable. We didn't have any cable TV. We didn't have any additional local channels. All
And
that
then when
she
I
had
did
was
have
the
TV,
internet connection.
When I did have TV, I watched My Little Pony, and I watched Daniel Tiger, and I watched
Okay,
Cat and Peggy.
okay, but My Little Pony, the guy in that, he played Q in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Doesn't. I'm just saying.
You make me sad sometimes. I love you. Well, I just need to, set you down with some original series and some,
No.
Next Generation.
No.
Yeah, I don't want her exposed to Han and your worms.
Oh, I've probably seen worse than Supernatural.
Oh no. That scene changed my life for the worse.
It was a good scene. I liked
That
it.
was an awful scene. That was so bad. So bad. I could still see that dude's head like bulging out. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Anyway, I've been watching a lot of crime cases recently.
And Karen, you've been watching Karen videos.
Oh, what butt ton of Karens.
So many Karen videos.
Makes me realize.
And yet you won't watch anything Star Trek. I am displeased.
Be
Sorry.
displeased then. Anyway, I watched this one about a guy who had a personality disorder, and he had been arrested before, and killed this woman who was working for this rich guy. I can't remember where exactly this was, but he killed this poor, like, basically maid, I guess you could call her. She wasn't a maid, she was like a housekeeper and stuff, and he helped him very. And this guy just saw her and decided to murder her and take her money, but not just that, he brutally murdered her. Like, when he was taking her to, he was taking her to a field of some sort, with woods, and if he hadn't have tried to, get caught, because he knew he was gonna get caught, he wouldn't have gotten caught, because, it was a very well planned out. It was, what he did was really detailed. What he did to her, he grabbed her up in a comforter, in a brown comforter that, had been at the house. And he, shoved her, wrapped her up in that, and he shoved her in the trunk. And then brought her to field.
He was gonna.
And then he brutally murdered her.
I didn't know you were into those kinds of videos. I just thought you were watching Terrence.
No, I'm watching actual. And I found another one where it was just this teenager. He and his mother having he murdered, and he.
Well, I'm just listening. I'm trying to decide if I should be concerned.
He murdered her as well, and dug a grave. He staged a burglary, and he said that he called the police saying that his mom was. And what actually happened was he had choked her out for 30 minutes maybe, and he drove her to this one spot and put her dead body under.
And remember, we're PG-13, so describe this carefully.
Under a fireplace with and he covered her body.
So what you're saying is we should do more true crime.
Obviously, you're interested.
Yeah.
Make sure if you find anything super interesting that you want Dad to take a deeper look into, that you send him a link so he knows, hey, this is what Krysta was checking into.
Well, it's my corner. I figured I should talk about something.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled you are. I'm just saying. That way if you come across something.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying if she came across something that she thought would make a good show, to make sure that she's sharing it with you so that you can look into research.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what else do you want to talk about in your corner?
I watched 4 more episodes.
So are you in season 7 yet? And you still haven't met Kevin? Kevin, the coffee pot angel.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Me too. Nah. Nah.
You're not going to appreciate her as much when she has to break your.
I would never do such a thing. How dare you?
Uh-huh.
Did you guys hear that Nana thing he was doing? Yeah, that's called a tickle shark. And then he was trying to get close to my leg and tickle me. I said no, and I put my phone up against his arm and I.
Or something else happened and you're just trying to frame me.
Chris, do you have anything else for your corner?
I see pretty.
I do have some.
But haven't those been there a minute, or is that new and I missed it?
No, they've been there a minute.
They've been there
Though
a
I
minute.
did find my butterflies that I colored.
Ooh.
I forgot
I
about
also
those.
see some pretty art from Little Child.
Yes. But I found my butterflies that I colored that they're in a frame.
I see some pretty art from you, too.
It's not as good as I am now.
Of your art.
I'm better at.
Okay.
Anyway,
I'll love that too.
that's it.
That's it? All right, wait. Wow. There were claps for my Krysta.
Oh my gosh.
Yay, Krista
Oh my
clap.
gosh.
Okay. Before we get into the backstory of this, I need to let people know that there are whole podcasts dedicated to the history of the Vietnam conflict, what led to it, the politics of the time period, as well as other events that sort of contributed to the atmosphere that Kent State that led to the events that happened that day. You can find any of those and go as in-depth as you want. What we are going to do is a quick overview of some of these events. Now, in 1970, the big thing was the conflict in Vietnam. Dwight Eisenhower began the American investment in Vietnam by sending 900 advisors. JFK upped that number to 15,000 advisors. Now, under LBJ, several 100,000 combat troops were sent over to Vietnam. And it's really where we began to get into fighting in that country. And while Nixon had campaigned that he had a secret plan to end the war, he began hostilities against targets in Cambodia, and he brought back the draft while also removing protections for college students. This led to loads of protests as the Vietnam conflict, which, if unpopular before, became seriously unpopular now. Further, reports emerged in '69 of the My Lai Massacre, where U.S. soldiers had killed hundreds of Vietnamese villagers, leading to even more protests. And mind you, these villagers weren't doing anything. It was confused, but if I remember correctly, I didn't look up the My Lai Massacre, so I'm going on memory here, but if I remember correctly, they were in the wrong place, saw the village, and decided that this is where they were supposed to do their thing. Turned out not to be the case. Or they had been leaderless. I'm not entirely sure, but what happened is they killed a bunch of innocent villagers. So, the war was not going well. America was accomplishing few, if any, of their objectives, and had few successes. So morale was diminishing quickly. And it led to a direct conflict between the older generation, who believed it was their duty to fight and defeat communism in all its forms, while the younger generation were idealistically opposed to fighting and dying in what was a civil war by the Vietnamese people. Campuses across the country became host to student strikes, sit-ins, and other protests. The older generation reacted to this with outright hostility, as did the powers that be. So that's sort of the background of the situation that we're going to get into.
Right.
Now, this is a blurb from Kent State's own website about where it is located. The Kent campus of Kent State University is located in Northeast Ohio in a city of about 28,000 residents on the banks of the Cuyahoga River in Portage County. Yet the campus is only a short drive from the resources of 4 major urban centers: 11 miles east of Akron, 33 miles southeast of Cleveland, 40 miles west of Youngstown, and 28 miles north of Canton. Kent State University is easily accessible from all directions via major interstate highways: Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Indiana turnpikes, and 2 airports. In addition to easy and fairly quick access to 4 major population centers, Kent State had a history of activism and protests that began in 1966 when protesters marched in the homecoming parade in military gear with gas masks, which was just a protest of Vietnam. In 1968, Students for a Democratic Society and Black United students staged a sit-in to protest the police recruiting on campus. On April 1st, 1969, Students for a Democratic Society attempted to enter the admissions office with a list of demands where they clashed with state police who refused to let them into the office. For this, Kent State revoked their charter and held a disciplinary hearing for 2 of the former members. This led to a confrontation between supporters and opponents of the Student Democratic Society, which led to the Ohio State Patrol being called in, 58 students being arrested, and 4 leaders of the SDS serving 6-month jail sentences. In April of 1970, Jerry Rubin, a leader of the Youth International Party, also known as the Yippies, spoke on campus advocating for students to kill their parents, as their parents are the first oppressors. Finally, a former student and former member of SDS passed out flyers stating he was going to napalm a dog. But when people got to the location, he instead held a teach-in about the dangers of napalm.
So, a lot of the poorly demonstrated bad decision making
On whose part?
on the people who were. I mean, did this actually cause things to change, or?
No, but especially in the 60s,
Right.
students were politically active, and to expect them not to be was just wishful thinking at its worst. So, were these all great ideas? No, some of them very bad ideas. But kind of they're right in their role, as long as, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed appropriately.
Right.
Let's take a moment for a word from another podcast. I don't remember who it is this week, so we'll all be surprised.
Uh-huh.
Welcome to Shatsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunani, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe.
Stay awesome, and most importantly,
Stay hydrated.
We'll have to check that out.
Yes, we will. Krysta, you want to take over?
Yeah. Alright. On Thursday, April 30th, Nixon announced that the Cambodia incursion on an attempt to get
Viet Cong.
Viet Cong leaders and supplies would begin. On Friday, May 1st, the day began with protests by 500 students who were very angry about the war in Vietnam, now infringing upon rights of yet another sovereign territory. Around 1 p.m., students had to get to class, so protest was for May 4th. Many students were angry. A group of histories buried a copy of the Constitution symbolized Nixon had killed it. Someone tacked up a sign asking why the ROTC
Yep.
building was still standing. At midnight Friday night, some in a bar began to throw beer bottles at police cars and store windows. Someone broke a bank window, setting off alarms. The news spread quickly, and several bars closed early to avoid trouble. This put more and more people on the street, who joined in the vandalism. By the time police arrived, there were over 120 people in the group of protesters, and one of them had started a bonfire in the street. The protesters were a mix of students, bikers, homeless people who were yelling and throwing bottles. Kent Mayor Leroy Satcham declared a state of emergency and ordered the bars closed before calling Ohio Governor Jim Rhodes for further advice. By this point, every officer in Kent had been called an emergency dude, and they even were getting help from districts, sheriff's office, and the like. The decision to close bars created further tension, and eventually the police forced tear gas the rioters back several blocks to the camp.
All right, and now let's take a moment for a word from our sponsors.
Hey, babe.
Yes, dear.
Yes, sponsor.
Yay! So on Saturday, May 2nd, rumors began to circulate that radical revolutionaries had targeted both the town and the university for destruction. Local businesses began to receive threats that they would be destroyed if they didn't post something in their windows about being anti-war. Police believed that they had credible information that the ROTC building, the post office, and the local army recruiting station would be targeted for destruction that evening. The police also had unconfirmed rumors that several students had large caches of weapons and that some students had dug a tunnel under the town to attack stores from beneath, and that there was a student-led plot to spike the water supply with LSD.
Wow.
Confronted with all these rumors, Mayor Satcham called Jim Rhodes around 5 p.m. that night to request the National Guard. Rhodes granted the request, and the National Guard arrived that night around 10 p.m. By that time, another protest was happening on campus, and the ROTC building was in flames. Now, a later investigation by the FBI concluded that few, if any, active students were part of the group of arsonists. While extinguishing the ROTC building, police and firemen were struck by rocks and other thrown objects. More and more fire departments had to be called, as the protesters would take the fire hoses to the commons where they would slash them, thus requiring yet another truck to come with another hose. The National Guard made a few arrests, mostly for curfew violation, and one student suffered a bayonet injury.
Goodness gracious. Oh. So, on Sunday, May 3rd, Governor Jim Rhodes holds a press conference at the local firehouse. He is clearly agitated and passionate. He pounds on the desk as he is quoted as saying, "We've seen here at the city of Kent, especially, probably the most vicious form of campus-oriented violence yet perpetrated by dissident groups. They make definite plans of burning, destroying, and throwing rocks at police, and at the National Guard and the Highway Patrol. This is when we are going to use every part of the law enforcement agency of Ohio to drive them out of Kent. We are going to eradicate the problem. We're not going to treat the symptoms. And these people just move from one campus to the other and terrorize the community. They're worse than the brown shirts and the communist element, and also the night riders and the vigilantes. They're the worst type of people that we harbor in America. Now, I want to say this. They are not going to take over the campus. I think that we're up against the strongest, well-trained, militant, revolutionary group that has ever assembled in America. Rhodes made it sound like he was in the process of creating a state of emergency and that something akin to martial law had been declared, though he never filed any such paperwork. Students came downtown to help with the cleanup, a move that met with as much grouchiness as it did gratitude. Under pressure from both the governor and local businesses, the mayor ordered a curfew into effect until further notice. At 8 p.m., another rally begins on campus. By 8:45, the National Guard has dispersed the crowd with tear gas. The crowd regathered at nearby Lincoln and Main, where they held a sit-in in the hopes of arranging a meeting with the mayor and the university president, Robert White. At 11 p.m., the National Guard announced that curfew had been declared and began to move students to their dorms. There were a handful of skirmishes and a few more students were injured.
So Monday, May 4th, if you remember the timeline, this is the day of the massacre. Back on May 1st, if you'll remember, a protest was planned here on the Common at noon. The university attempted to ban this gathering by handing out several thousand flyers saying the protest had been canceled. Still, on noon that day, around 2,000 or so people gathered on the Commons near Taylor Hall. At noon, someone rang the iron victory bell, which is ordinarily used to signal victories in football games, and a man gave a short speech. The crowd carried a few flags, but all seemed quiet and peaceful. Around noon, the National Guard obtained a bullhorn from the Kent Police Department, which they used to address the crowd, telling them to disperse. Now, the crowd can't hear this and literally does not react to it. So they get a campus cop, put him in a Jeep with 3 National Guardsmen, who drives up to the crowd, addressing them with a bullhorn and telling them to disperse. The crowd responds with obscene gestures. A few shake their naked rears at the men in the Jeep. Most of the crowd responds with chanting or singing protest songs. A few rocks are thrown, one striking the guardsman, one of the guardsmen, the other striking the Jeep. No damage was caused to either. The Jeep retreats as the National Guard plans their next attempt. The next attempt was to lob tear gas at the crowd. However, the launchers they used were not getting close enough, and all they managed to do was get the back of the crowd to move forward a bit. The wind blew the tear gas around, making it ineffective, as students would grab shells and hurl them back at the National Guard to the amusement of the crowd. Many in the crowd began to chant, "Pigs off campus." Another order to disperse was made, and in response, the crowd chanted louder. It was at this point that almost 100 soldiers from the A and C companies of the 145th Infantry as well as the G Company of the 107th Armored Cavalry, were ordered to advance. Most were armed with M1 Garand rifles, though a few had handguns or shotguns loaded with birdshot. Before advancing, the men of Company C were told only to fire in the air and for only one guardsman to fire. It is unknown if any of the other guardsmen were told anything about firing. The guardsmen begin to move up the hill towards the protesters, only to be met with thrown rocks and other things. Still, the guardsmen continue onward. More tear gas is fired into the crowd as the crowd leaves the Commons, heading around the front of Taylor Hall and towards the parking lot by nearby Prentice Hall. By this point, the crowd had left the Commons as instructed, and the guardsmen were assembled in the corner of a practice field, boxed in by a fence. The protesters, at least the ones remaining, were either on the veranda of Taylor Hall or spaced out in the parking lot between Taylor and Prentice Hall. The National Guardsmen seemed to huddle and discuss something. Around this time, someone ordered the men of Troop G to kneel and face the parking lot. They did so, aiming their weapons, but no one fired. Meanwhile, someone, likely an officer, fired a handgun into the air. The guardsmen now advanced between 10 and 50 people began to pelt the guardsmen with rocks. The guardsmen continued up the hill, still being pelted, but with far fewer people doing the pelting. The guardsmen walked through the protesters to just beyond Taylor Hall when they turned and, without warning, began to fire on the crowd. So, this next bit, we've got eyewitness testimony from different people. Some we identify, some we don't. This first one comes from an unnamed source interviewed by a reporter for the United Press International. Suddenly, they turned around, got on their knees as if they were ordered to. They did it all together and aimed. And personally, I was standing there saying, they're not going to shoot. They can't do that. And if they are going to shoot, they're going to be shooting blanks.
Second is an eyewitness testimony. When asked about seeing the men drop to one knee and aim their rifles, everybody laughed. I mean, come on, you're not going to shoot us. And this came from Chris Butler, founder of the band The Week.
The firing stopped. I lay there maybe 10 or 15 seconds. I got up and saw 4 or 5 youngsters laying around the lot. By this time, it was like mass hysteria. Students were crying. They were screaming for ambulance. Unnamed source interviewed by United Press International.
So our fourth little bit of eyewitness testimony. Then I heard the tat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat sound. I thought it was fireworks. An eerie sound fell over the common. The quiet felt like gravity pulling us to the ground. Then a young man's voice. They bleeping killed somebody. And bleeping is mine. I have sanitized these so that everything slowed down and the silence got heavier. The ROTC building, now nothing more than a few inches of charcoal, was surrounded by National Guardsmen. They were all on one knee and pointing their rifles at us. Then they fired. By the time I made my way to where I could see them, it was still unclear what was going on. The guardsmen themselves looked stunned. We looked at them and they looked at us. They were just kids, 19 years old, like us, but in uniform, like our boys in Vietnam. That's from Chrissy Hind, who was a Kent State student at the time. Later, she became the lead singer of The Pretenders.
Fifth eyewitness testimony. All I can tell you is that it completely and utterly changed my life. I was a white hippie boy, and then I saw exit wounds from M1 rifles out of the backs of 2 people I knew. 2 of the 4 people who were killed, Jeffrey Miller and Allison Krause, were my friends. We were all running off our asses off from these mother bleepers. It was total, utter bull snot. That one struck too.
Yep.
Live ammunition and gas masks. None of us knew, none of us could have imagined. They shot into a crowd that was running from them. I stopped being a hippie and I started to develop the idea of de-evolution. I got real pissed off. That's from Gerald Castle, who was the singer, bassist for Devo, and also a former Kent State.
When asked later, some of the guardsmen claimed that they fired on the crowd because they were advancing on guard. Some claimed that they were worried about a sniper or more stones. Others simply fired because others assumed others were and assumed a command had been given. Some fired out of fear. One of the National Guard commanders publicly claimed that they had been under attack by snipers. This was not true. A subsequent FBI investigation found the National Guard fire their first shots. A later presidential committee investigating the matter placed the blame on both the protesters and the National Guardsmen, and eventually concluded indiscriminate firing of rifles in the crowd of students, and the deaths that followed were unnecessary, unwarranted, and inexcusable.
After the shots were fired, several students sat down on the commons demanding to know why the National Guard opened fire. However, photographers and members of the faculty were able to convince them to disperse, as the National Guard had already ordered them to disperse, saying they would fire again if the students did not. Sooner or later, the students dispersed. So let's discuss who the victims were. First, Jeffrey Glenn Miller. He was struck in the mouth by a bullet. He died instantly. Allison B. Krause, wound in the left chest. She was dead on arrival at the hospital. William Knox Schroeder, who was a member of the campus ROTC, was struck in the chest, died an hour later on the operating table. Sandra Lee Schuer, shot in the neck, died seconds later of blood loss. Joseph Lewis Jr., shot twice in the abdomen and lower left leg. He survived. John R. Cleary, upper left chest wound. He also survived. Thomas Mark Grace was struck in the left ankle by a bullet. Again, he survived. Alan Michael Canfora was struck in the right wrist. Dean R. Kaler was shot in the back, was paralyzed from the chest down, but he survived. Douglas Allen Wentmore was struck in the right knee. James Dennis Russell hit in the right thigh from a bullet and grazed on his right forehead by either a bullet or bird shot. Both wounds very minor. And Robert Follis Stamps hit in his right buttock. And then Donald Scott McKenzie suffered a minor neck wound. In the wake of the Kent State shootings, more and more campuses became shut down with protests, some violent, some not. The Vietnam conflict, whose popularity was pretty low, was even less popular, and many claim the events at Kent State eventually led to the end of the Vietnam conflict. It also dramatically increased student solidarity for some time, and even to this day, college campuses are often hotbeds of political activity. So that's what happened on May 4th, 1970. I'm going to stand with the students here overall. A couple of reasons. One, I think it's perfectly your right in a free country to protest a government's overreach. And I really feel like that whether you agree or not, a war moving into another country without Congress's backing the president on it, just we're going to go do this now, was absolutely worth protesting. And if they had just let them protest, it doesn't seem like it would have been a big deal.
I don't know about that, because when they start, here's. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I can make my point.
Well, on May 4th, when they did the protest they had scheduled, and they showed up to do it. About 2,000 people showed up. They rang a bell. Guy did a speech. They didn't do anything until the National Guard got involved. And if the National Guard had just left them alone, I imagine there would have been some talking, some cheering, and then they all would have left and got coffees.
Yeah, but I don't think it was just left at that. When the events leading up to that May 4th, there were people attacking the ROTC building. There were threats being made. There were other things going on leading up to that. And I think that's where it's like, that's not, at that point, we've gone past just a peaceful sit-in or a protest. By that point, there is a large unrest in the entire area. Police have been called in. Things have been put into play. That is not when you go and have a calm, peaceful protest. You wait until things calm down, and then you can have your calm, peaceful protest. But that's why I wouldn't be involved in things like this, because that's not how I say my part, personally. And me, this is the way that people get kind of pulled into these things, is because there's a point where it can't be a peaceful protest anymore because of the people and the bad things have happened up to this day. You know, I have to look at the whole picture and go, if that all was going on downtown here,
I'd be down there with a flag.
and you take a very real chance of being one of those people who might not have lived, because you know all of those things are going on, and you're intentionally putting yourself in that. You can no longer have a peaceful protest because of all the hubbub that's come up to that point.
But it was a peaceful protest until the National Guard got involved. They hadn't done anything. They had gotten together like they said they were gonna. A guy had given a short speech. Few people held signs. If the National Guard hadn't sent Robbie and 3 National Guardsmen bouncing around in a car, they wouldn't have shaken their ass at them, much less anything else that happened that day. On top of that, a lot of these people are already scared. The National Guard is stationed on campus. Police are recruiting on campus. Any protection they had for being college students is out the window. What do you do then?
Fair enough.
I'm going to stand with the kids on this one.
All right.
Chris? So where are you on all this?
Okay, I'm gonna put my opinion out here. No one has to agree with me. No one has to. I am in the middle. There always has to be. I definitely think that they should. I understand they want to protest. And, you know, the
Yeah.
The-
There.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, the
National
ROTC
Guard.
was not there. It was just the building that was there.
was it the National Guard who attacked?
Yeah.
Okay. What did not have to happen? The National Guard did not have to. Nobody had to attack it. It has to be an attacking.
You're right. I don't ever think that there's a reason to degrade violence. But that being said, I'm gonna know that there's a chance that that would happen because that's what's been happening every single day.
Well, part of it, and people are going to get mad at me over this, part of it is you brought in the National Guard. And the National Guard, a lot of those guys, they call them weekend warriors for a reason. And giving Harry and Tommy a couple of shotguns and telling them to have at leads to this.
I'm not saying yay or nay on that. I'm just saying that.
Because it wasn't like someone on the side of the Kent State students pulled up a gun and then the National Guard went, "Oh no, he's got a gun, let's shoot." No, they just shot, no reason.
Yeah.
They were never ordered to. And
I'm not saying that what they did was okay. What I'm saying is that me as a person, if I go to that scenario where you went over the whole backstory, that's in the news, in front of your face, every single day. So if you know that's been going on for the last, 120 hours, that's not when I say, oh, I'm going to go to this big scheduled sit-in to protest and everything's going to be fine.
And that's on one person. That is their decision, right? That is understandable that things like that happen. But the fact that they're protesting, that isn't wrong at all.
No, I don't disagree with that. Absolutely not. Everyone should have the right to protest.
Everyone should have the right to protest, and they shouldn't have shot all those people. But you know what? I agree with you in the fact that maybe that was the wrong time. Maybe they should have done that in some of. Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I'm not disagreeing with him on he's talking. I'm just saying that maybe violence wasn't.
No, definitely. I don't think the violence was ever the end. But.
Well, talk to the people in my life. See how they feel about it. The people in my life were the ones killed.
Yeah, no,
the whole village it was killed.
Yeah.
By American troops.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. The whole thing was horrible. And there is no good answer to why wars happen or why all of that goes on. Like you said, there are whole podcasts dedicated to specifically Vietnam and everything that took place around it. We're definitely not going to dig into that in our little hour-long show.
It's definitely.
Of course not.
We can only look back from sort of what happened and try our best.
But I think that's kind of the whole idea about learning history.
Yeah, you look back at your history and like, well, no.
And see, I don't know that this could have not happened.
I think it was pretty inevitable.
And my reason for saying that is I don't know that this could have not happened because of all the stuff it took for it to happen. This isn't one guy firing on somebody and going, oops, my bad. This is multiple guys firing at many people without ever being ordered to. For varying reasons, they interviewed a lot of these guys afterwards, and their reasons differed from, one guy said the sky was black with stones. Others said that they were fired at by a sniper, which absolutely was not true. Some of the guys just saw others shooting and was like, oh, the order must have been given. For all of that to go wrong the way that it did, I think there was no way out of this. Something was going to happen, if not that day, very soon. Because enough tinder had been stoked under stuff that when someone lit a match, a fire was going to happen. And I think events reached that sort of critical mass. So I don't know that this couldn't have happened. Maybe it wouldn't have happened at Kent State, but maybe it would have happened out in California or someplace else, you know.
I definitely.
Oh,
I
yeah,
definitely think there
absolutely.
could have been more deaths, but it is fact. You know, there or something. And I think just people should have their rights, but that whether or not.
And the other thing to me is the way the conservatives, because it was a mostly conservative decision to stand behind the war, the conservatives sort of reacted to it. Like, all these people are communists in the middle of the country. And clearly they're not. They're students. They're idealistic. Maybe if you talk and don't shoot, we can get somewhere. But no, you insist you're right. And so when John Wayne goes running out of a dinner to attack a bunch of protesting kids, you know, why is it the kids' problem? John Wayne's being the jerk in that situation, which actually did happen. He was at some Hollywood dinner and there were kids outside protesting the Vietnam War, and he ran out specifically to get into a fight. Didn't happen, but he was trying. Anyway, point is
that wars are always hard on the people at war and the people back home.
but we should never have been in that war, which is kind of their point.
Well,
It was a civil war among the people in Vietnam. And if we had left it to just advisors, wouldn't have been a thing. So LBJ kind of owns some on this. Nixon owns a lot more because Nixon was a lying dirtbag. But any other things we want to add before we get out of here?
I think I'm good. I just
Okay.
no.
Okay, well then that's our show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for keeping us in the Good Pod Top 100.
Yay!
Yay! Thanks to Bill Berendt, who does our theme music. That last name is spelled Behrendt. If you need music for a project, if you need someone to perform at an event, Bill's your guy. You can reach him at billberendt@sbcglobal.net. He also is one half of the Rusty and Dusty podcast, so catch him on there. Also, thanks to Paige Elmore of the Reverie Crime podcast. Paige is an amazing podcaster, but she also has a Canva addiction that she has combined with her own Krysta's artwork to help create logo art. Thank you, Paige. Thanks to Aaron Gnurk of the Big Dumb Fun Show, who continues to promote us locally. Join our Facebook group, and we noticed several of you have been. Thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Lots of people guessed Kent State this week from the picture, so that's cool. And join us next week as we look into Pecos Bill, or maybe something else.
Maybe something else.
Bye.
Bye.